Well, we're just going to get right into it.
Working class people really struggle. If you have to be arrested, working class people is going to get a much rougher treatment.
Welcome back to the channel. I'm here in a very special place in the northeast of England, about 3 hours from where I live, called Beamish. It's a large, open-air living museum, so essentially a recreation of what life used to be like here in northeast England over 100 years ago. There are shops, pubs, fish and chip restaurants, and even working trams and all kinds of other things that you can see here. It was created a long time ago by somebody who was inspired by his visit to Scandinavia and seeing similar things over there. So let's explore. We're going to try some coal-fired fish and chips, which I'm very excited about. Just missed the tram by like a couple of minutes. It was already closed and ready to set off by the time I arrived through the entrance. The bus is just a special request for people that need it, like disabilities, so I can't get on that one. Apparently it's a 15-minute walk to the town this way. Probably 5 for me. I don't want to waste time. God knows how long I wait for the next tram. Anyway, a little bit about Beamish. It's a self-reliant charity, so the admission fees and the things that you buy here basically will pay the wages of all the actors and the workers here for the upkeep of the place. And it's obviously a very culturally and historically significant museum. And a fun day out for people here in England. So you buy this pass for adults, it's around £27, and this is unlimited for a whole year. Check that out. They're committed to it. Even the bikes are from like the 1940s. Anyhow, this pass gets you access year round for just £27. I think that's great value, considering many places will charge you that just for an admission fee every time you go. And it seems to me that you can get a good 5 hours of things to do and see, and that's if you're taking it at a pretty rushed pace. Obviously, I won't visit many times in a year because it's quite the hassle to get there from my home in Sheffield. But if you live in the local area, I mean, it's excellent. There's a colliery village. We're heading towards Hockley, the 1820s town. It's 200 years ago. Take a look to see if this horse was real or not. It's still very still, but then I saw its eyes moving. It's pretty impressive, the scope of this place. To think all this land belongs to the museum. It is essentially the size and scope of a real town, even with little pocket villages surrounding it. I might not even be able to see the whole thing in one day. Maybe I will have to return actual working forms. For surely you wouldn't raise a herd of sheep just for the bit, right? So this must actually all be operational. The Sheffield Corporation tramways.
This image of Edwardian elegance has quite the storied history. Originally delivered to Sheffield Tramways from Preston in 1907, it served the commuters of Sheffield for quite some time. This double-decked 54-seater was rebuilt in 1926 with a fully enclosed top deck, but eventually was relegated to peak hour usage, owing to the introduction of more modern trams in Sheffield. Eventually it ended up in Gateshead and served the public up north until the early 1950s. It was gifted to Beamish in 1973 and since then has undergone extensive repairs and restorations, including returning it to its open top deck balcony design.
Well, the playground apparatus certainly doesn't look like it belongs in the 1820s. That betrays the aesthetic a little bit. There to the 1820s town. Stumbled upon a little recreation of the 1950s, which is still being worked on. Many of these buildings are recreations of actual businesses that existed at that time period here in the northeast. So we've got a cinema, the Grand Hope, which existed in Sunderland in the 1950s. This probably did somewhere at some point. And just over here is a fish and chip shop, not the one that we're going to be visiting, but one that looks very popular. Middleton's Fish and Chips. The lady that actually ran that chippy helped recreate it and continued to work here until I think she retired or died. This one's not the one I'm going to. I'm going to Davies, which has been here longer and is a lot more famous for its coal-fired fish and chips. But the queue out there is huge, so that must be good too.
Fish and chips, essentially the national dish of Britain, is so quintessentially part of our identity.
Once upon a time it was roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. Now it's fish and chips, Britain's new national dish.
It was a staple of the British working class during the Second World War. The reason being it was one of very few foods that were not rationed. In fact, the government believed that keeping fish and chips available was important for morale during these times of distress. Prime Minister Winston Churchill famously called them good companions, and George Orwell, in The Road to Wigan Pier, wrote that fish and chips were a home comfort that helped keep the masses happy and averted revolution. So yeah, fish and chips go hand in hand with being British.
Authentic. Not a McDonald's or a Starbucks in sight. Just local businesses. Milk bar. £2.10 deposit, 38 weeks to pay. You can get a fridge in your home back then for £2.10, which would have been a lot, to be fair. Back then this would have been cutting-edge kitchen appliances. Often sold in the same shops. There's bicycles, radios, TVs. Of course, village police station. Back when you had bobbies on the beat, cops patrolling the streets on foot, and the police stations, rather than just having centralised city and town centre locations, would have ones that just look like regular houses, just like so. Oh. Seems like my head's too big to be a police officer in the 1950s. Yeah, I suppose these are replicas created for children. Not weirdos like me walking around trying on. Let's take a look at the 1950s English kitchen. Not a fridge inside. Back then, in the 1950s, they were still on rations post World War II. In the early 50s anyhow, because they were still trying to catch up with the food supplies that were hindered during the war. So people had very basic pantries, tin food, slop, bread, potatoes. In fact, you can attribute Britain's infamously bland diet to that era, when people really just didn't have much or access to much. A lot of people seemingly never got over that.
Beans on toast, pour beans over a piece of toast.
In the 1950s, back then, families would eat together, get phones. Now, that one is popular. As hungry as I am though, I've got my eyes set on Davies. And as cool as this little 1950s recreation is, I'm more interested in the 1800s. I want to see the old sweet shops, the old chippy, Drover's Tavern, and have a look at some of the old jobs that no longer exist in the UK since then. Yeah, the Grand actually existed in Sunderland before all the cineplexes that were more Americanised all came to be in the UK. Then we used to have cinemas much like that. Nice old buildings, independently owned. Here we have an old Barclays Bank. This particular bank is still operational in the UK, probably one of the biggest and most popular British banks. A lot different to modern banks. Here where you get the teller's attention with the bell. Come in here for your meetings with the banker. Hello. And we'll go downstairs to the vault. be much easier to rob a bank back in these days. No CCTV, having to keep all the money on site instead of digitally. All you'd have to do is mask up, bring a gun, and the money's yours. And whatever else was being kept in deposit boxes by the locals who banked here. Coins, all in different amounts of bags. You see a £50 bag there. You walk away with £50 in a bank robbery, you've walked away with quite a sum. Back then £50 went a lot further than it does today. Now, it's what I paid to get the train towards Newcastle to get here. But back then, I think I could have bought a house. They're reenacting a women's voting rights march, and then we've got some kid here with an opposition to the women's vote, stood outside winding them up.
No vote for women! Get back to the kitchen sink! No vote for women! No vote for women!
This pub, let's see what they've got. Got a few cask ales, looks like some wines, a few vodkas and gins. Looks like they do their own. Slowly packed in here. I'll just stand in the corner and drink my drink and then head on out. Head on. Taxidermied dog right over there. And these beers are brewed here in Beamish?
No, it's done by a company called Firebird.
Oh, nice. Cool, yeah, let me try the blonde beer, please.
Is that a pint or half?
Pint, please.
Stay in there.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's it, thank you. So it's not made here in Beamish, but it is brewed locally here in the northeast, so it's still pretty good. Stand here by the fire, try with beer, £5.50. Definitely wouldn't cost £5.50 back then. Nice beer.
The pub. Just as idiosyncratic to our culture as fish and chips. Taverns can be traced all the way back to the Roman occupation of the British Isles, but it wasn't until the early 19th century that the pub as we know it today started to appear here. The significance of the public house goes far beyond just being a place to get pissed. It was often the focal point of local communities and has become important to many countries with British influence over the years as well, such as Australia. They've sadly been on the decline for the past several decades, with many closing their doors for good, for a variety of reasons, and the famous mega chain Wetherspoons holds dominion over the industry thanks to their unbeatable beer prices. But I don't think the Great British Pub will ever disappear.
They had the time and the money to go out and do their campaigning. Working class people were really struggling with that. And if you happen to be arrested, a working class woman is going to get a much rougher treatment in prison than a lady from a higher social standing. So if your husband is recognised and you know that you're a normal person, you're going to get treated much more gently in prison. There was force feeding with the suffragettes who decided to go on hunger strike, become martyrs for the cause, and the Liberal government introduced an act which became known as the Cat and Mouse Act. Because if you remember, a cat plays with a mouse before it kills it. It might keep it for hours. So what happened was, if you were in prison and your health was really deteriorating, they would force feed you. But that became very negative to you, really bad publicity. So what they did was they released you from prison until you got well again, then they put you back in prison. Hence the Cat and Mouse Act. So please go away and think about that. Put it of interest. One last thing to remember before you go is that the views that we've shown today do not necessarily reflect the views of us involved. Votes for women! Votes for women! If you want.
As that guy was saying at the end of that demonstration that women's rights were kind of a shambles at the 20th century, and the suffragette movement was obviously founded right at the turn of the century, campaigning for equality, campaigning for voting rights, and yeah, it was a tough battle. Anyway, something a little bit more cheerful. An old early 20th century recreation of a fair. Not a waltzer or a freak out in sight. Not quite as exhilarating as a modern fair, but a lot more charming. And still, of course, the iconic games where you can win prizes, some seesaws and carousels. Obviously, I'm a little bit too old to be riding on a carousel, so I'll just stop, take a look, and then I'm going to hunt for these fish and chips. I'm really determined to find Davy's fish and chips and get some proper coal-fired beef dripping fish and chips. Just something that's very hard to find in modern Britain. Everyone uses the cheap fucking vegetable oil these days, and it just doesn't have the right taste. Creation of a modest train station. This is all it would be. An outdoor open-air platform. The signaller's office. These signaller's offices can still be found all over the British railway infrastructure. Still many of them are actually used, but obviously now they use electric signals. But yeah, you'll find many of these old-fashioned, sometimes 150-year-old brick houses on the railway. And a lot of the platforms look just like this too. Impression so far though of Beamish. Wow. What a painstaking recreation of historical Britain this place really is. I mean, the effort, the time, the resources and the money that's been put into creating this, and it's still a work in progress. Like, always updating, adding new things, funded by charity, by the National Lottery, and by people coming and visiting and spending the money. It's really incredible, and it's such a fun day out. Kind of makes me want to have kids just so I can bring them here. Platform where you're waiting. No Subway, no Costa coffee, just somewhere to sit. A timetable, written on paper of course. And a little waiting office inside. Heated by a fire. And that, the North East. As already mentioned, that's my hometown, where I'm from. There's somewhere all the way up here. Not sure where exactly. My North-Eastern geography is not the best. History lovers, this one's for you. Whitbread's London Stout. Now, this was brewed during the outbreak of the Second World War, and during the latter years of the Second World War, hop usage was restricted by the government as part of its rationing, and as a result, the London Stout that they started producing around that time became, well, not very stouty. It was very low in alcohol as well. Rust and Bacyrus, fittingly, sounds quite similar to Rust Bucket. Seen better days.
This 1931 steam excavator was one of Beamish Museum's earliest acquisitions, and it was originally built to work in a chalk quarry in Hessel, Yorkshire.
Seen. Close to 2:20. Heading to Rotherham. My hometown. Can we actually board the bus? It looks like we can. Let's board the bus to Rotherham. It's a long journey. Oh, fuck's sake. Can't get on. I believe some of these are still operational around here though, like taking you to the little different exhibits and stuff, so I'm going to see if I can jump on one. I just never seem to get there on time. I see them going past, but never stopping. In an old colliery village from the 1800s, where the majority of households here will have been on a mining income. Yeah, most of the men here will have worked in the local mines. Children all went to the school, all done the shopping, probably never really left the area. Why would they? Everything they have and need is right here in this village.
A colliery is the name for the mine, known in England as the pit, and its structures such as the ord itself, the shafts, the tunnels, etc. And a colliery village was a settlement built by the owner of the colliery to house all the workers and their families. They were especially prominent in Yorkshire and the North East, where the mining industry was absolutely huge. You see, once upon a time, coal was our biggest source of energy and one of our most important industries, peaking in 1913 when 213 million tonnes of coal was mined in Britain. Today, coal mining is all but resigned to the history books, but many of us up north come from mining families who went through the brutal era of closures and strikes under Thatcher's infamous political reign.
See a lot of people with cotton to chips, and that means Davis Fish and Chips must be nearby. Chippy and the queue. It's absolutely insane, but I'm committed. I can smell it. It smells amazing, and I'm gonna wait. We'll have to wait, I'm sure. Look at the queue. My place in the queue. The smell from this place is absolutely incredible. Honestly, proper traditional fish and chips. You've got the coal-fired range over there, and they cook everything in beef dripping. None of that vegetarian nonsense. It's absolutely amazing. Can't wait. Look, can I just get the fish and chips, please? One portion.
It's 11.75.
Look at this. Look, loads of chips already. Let's put in that coal-fired range. This smells incredible. I'm so excited for this.
Won't be long. There is tables, covered tables, on the other side of the building. The pack is too hot.
Testing the crispness of the chips to see if they're ready. A couple of minutes to go. The reason why the fish is so quick and easy to cook and the chips on is because obviously the potato has a high water content, which makes it take a little bit longer to get just right. So the fish are ready to go. Kept inside a little steel tray to keep warm, and then the chips are served hot, straight out of the fryer. 10-minute check. Definitely didn't have that equipment back in the day, but thank you very much. There we go. Just look at it. Perfectly crispy. Can't wait to get tucked into this. The smell from that place was just making me salivate. Seriously. Just take a look at how crispy. You can just tell without feeling it that that is just going to be supremely crispy. Beef dripping smells amazing. I want to go sit on this bench over here and get tucked right in. Well, we're just going to get right into served in artificial newspaper, because back in the day it was served in real newspaper. Obviously not going to be very advisable for health now with all the ink that was in it, but let's just go for a chip to begin with. Straight off the bat, nice crispy skin. It's really fluffy on the inside, so we can see if the taste lives up to the hype. Traditional beef dripping chips. That is a perfect chippy chip, honestly. Well worth the wait. Fucking hell. I'm a big fan of fish and chips. I get it as a treat quite often whenever I go to the coast. It's the highlight of my trip. This is just as good as on the coast. This is what fish and chips is about. Just gonna take a bite of this fish. Straight in the head. No messing. Yeah. Flaky white fish on the inside, crispy, juicy skin, flavourful, tastes so fresh. Don't get much better than this, mate, honestly. This is elite 10 out of 10 fish and chips. I don't need curry sauce, Not on the menu anywhere. Don't need gravy, not on the menu anywhere. They just serve simple, old-fashioned fish and chips. You can get chips on their own, you can get fish on their own, or you can get them together. No sausages, no rissoles, no kebab, no burgers, none of this modern additions to the old chip shop. Just good old-fashioned fish and chips done bloody right. You'll be queuing for at least 20 minutes, but it's worth every second of the wait. That fish, look how flaky that is. And that crunchy batter. Why did we abandon the old ways? This is fish and chips how it should be. I'm going to savour every little bite of this, and then I'll check in with you once I'm done. But this was worth the trip to Beamish all alone. We're boarding the Rotherham bus. If only it was taking me home to Rotherham now. We have it, boarded the Rotherham bus. Let's go. There we are. 3 hours spent, Beamish Museum. Seen some interesting recreations of old buildings, old villages. Had a beer. Had the best fish and chips I've had in probably years. And picked up a couple of little souvenirs. Now I'm going to get a bus to Newcastle and drink for a few hours.